Welcome back, everybody. Today's Friday, September 26, 2025. Born on this date in 1899, composer of the Negro Folk Symphony, William L. Dawson of Anniston. In 1917, trumpet player Nelson Cadillac Williams of Montgomery. And in 1932, NASA astronaut Clifton Williams of Mobile. Well, the biggest non-news story I have for you is that the rapture did not take place this week, despite a South African pastor's prediction that was so prolifically shared on TikTok that you would assume it just had to be true. I probably should clarify that I think the rapture didn't take place this week. I'm one of those who believe you either decided to punch your ticket or you didn't. There's always the chance that sophomore year will count against me more than I thought. I spoke with my mom last night. She's still here, so that's a good sign. Billy Graham's not around anymore, so we need a new national bellwether for future rapture rumor double checking. Today we're going to talk Cullman history with local writer and journalist Greg Richter. It's like a continuation of our occasional place names series, but we're going deeper. We'll have a lot more. First, we have news updates on Thursday's execution, Marshall Space Flight Center leadership, and the passing of the founder of American Village. I'm Mike Morgan, and we're down in Alabama. The state of Alabama carried out the execution of convicted killer Jeffrey Todd West at 6:22 p.m. Thursday, reports AL.com's Ivana Rincu. West became the sixth Alabama inmate to die by nitrogen gas. Once again, there was some gasping and other movements during application of the nitrogen. Alabama Department of Corrections Commissioner John Hamm described all his movements as involuntary and said the execution went according to expectation. In 1997, West robbed a gas station where he had worked previously in Etowah County. He took $250 from the register and shot clerk Margaret Parrish Berry in the back of the head as she lay face down on the floor. Berry's son Will Berry had asked Governor Kay Ivey to spare West's life. He wrote in a petition, quote, "Vengeance isn't for the state, it's for the Lord. Forgiveness is a commandment for us." West wrote in a final statement that he was sorry for the crime, that he was humbled by Will Berry's forgiveness, and that he himself had been baptized as a Catholic. He urged people to seek God and said he knew where he was going and that he looked forward to seeing Margaret Berry there. In a statement released Thursday night, Governor Ivey wrote, quote, "As I expressed in a letter to one of Miss Berry's sons, it is my solemn duty as governor to carry out these laws. Tonight, the lawfully imposed death sentence has been carried out. Justice has been served, and I pray for healing for all." Marshall Space Flight Center Director Joseph Pelfrey has notified employees he plans to step down, reports AL.com's Scott Turner. Now, he'll be doing work with NASA, however, and this coming Tuesday, he'll join a panel on NASA's transition from the International Space Station to commercial space stations. Pelfrey has been directing Marshall since July 2023, first as an acting director and then in the permanent job. Marshall Deputy Center Director Ray Ann Meyer will serve as acting director while NASA conducts a search for a replacement. The founder of American Village has passed away, reports AL.com's Greg Garrison. American Village is a site with Revolutionary War-era replica buildings and actors who dress as American figures from that area. It's located on 188 acres in Montevallo and is used to teach history and civics. It's open to the public and each year draws thousands of people, including groups of school children. If you began public school in Central Alabama since the campus opened in 1999, you may have walked through their doors. Tom Walker thought of the idea during the 1980s. for a long time. He's wanted to build a replica of Independence Hall in Philadelphia, and he's hoped it would be featured on next year's 4th of July, which will be the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. Independence Hall opened Thursday, the day Walker died. Tom Walker was 71 years old. Hey, folks, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back and talk a little Cullman history with Greg Richter. Y'all stay with us. Hey, thanks everybody for staying with us. Now, regular listeners will recall that during this year, especially early on, we were doing some segments on the origins of place names in Alabama, like cities and counties and rivers, and we did Houston County and all that stuff. Well, sometime this past spring, I thought about Cullman, which is a city and a county, by the way. And I thought, hey, I need to bring Greg Richter in to explain this. And it made sense for me to wait, to me anyway, until Oktoberfest for reasons that'll be revealed, I'm sure, in a minute. And now Oktoberfest is upon us, October 2nd through the 4th, I believe. Let's welcome a past president of the Cullman County Historical Society, veteran of historic tours, writer, editor, journalist, Greg Richter. It's good to talk to you again, Greg.
Good to talk to you, Ike.
You getting along all right? How's Laura doing?
Doing okay, doing okay. We're spending part time in South Carolina near the beach, and still living in Cullman. Still got our old farmhouse there that my great grandparents built in the 1885.
That's a pretty good two places to hang out in.
Yeah.
I've spent some time around Myrtle Beach.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's pretty nice. Laura loves the beach, so. And I have learned to love the beach myself. I have fair skin, but I've learned how to get around go out after we go on our beach walks after 4 p.m. So we're good to go.
we yeah, I don't like being too far away from salt water. It seems like both towns you also have an Alabama band proximity also, which
True.
is
Yes,
perfect.
this is where Alabama was discovered. The Alabama band and the Alabama theater is there's an Alabama theater in Birmingham. There's an Alabama theater in Myrtle Beach, named after the band Alabama.
Uh, all right.
They have their
Well,
own.
well, you mentioned your wife Laura. Now she did the documentary "Becoming Colonel Coleman" with you.
That's
That
correct.
gets into part of our story here. Tell us who Johann Coleman was.
Well, Johann Gottfried Cullman was a German. He was kind of, I don't know, he described himself as a revolutionary. There's a little bit um speculation that he may have bolstered his resume a little bit to make himself. But he was involved in the freedom movement in Germany in the 1870s or the 1860s when that sort of thing was going on in the German ununified German states, and he kind of got on the wrong side of Kaiser Wilhelm and that kind of stuff. So he had to leave. He had the honorary title of colonel. He wasn't. I don't think he was actually in the military, but he kind of had to get out of Dodge, so to speak, or out of Frankweiler specifically. And it was when he got out, is the American Civil War was still going on, so he didn't come straight to America. He went to London for a while, and then once the Civil War was over in 1865, moved to New York City, immigrated, and then he went down to Cincinnati, where there was a large German population, and ran a bookstore basically, and or worked at a bookstore. Decided he wanted to start a German colony just from scratch. Came to Alabama. I think Florence was the first place he looked. He hooked up with the North and South Alabama Railroad, and he got a deal there as an agent for the railroad. Basically, they wanted the railroad wanted a stop and a place to stop, and because they were just going through the area that's now Cullman was just wilderness.
Right.
And there were people there. There were some families there. There was the Brindleys was a big family on one side of town, and the Spiegels were another family. And there's still people there. Descendants of those people are still in Cullman County, but there was no town established where the railroad could have a stop there. So
Oh.
that was the railroad's part of it. And then so he came along as their agent, and his ideal was to have an idea for an ideal community, I guess, was to have a German community for refugees like himself. So he started a newspaper called Der Nord Alabama Colonist, which was the North Alabama Colonist in German. He started a newspaper where he would recruit people to come over. He started with 5 original families, and it was basically a Nothingsville, and but it was a stop. The train station, they had a stop. They had 5 families and a few items. They had a church, the St. John's German Protestant church was the first church, and then they had once they got enough people there that they needed a Catholic church, so they started Sacred Heart. And so those were the first 2 churches. They were all German,
Mm.
and Colonel Coleman was a member of the Protestant church,
Oh.
and but he was helpful in founding the Catholic church as well. And so over time, they just got more and more people, and they grew exponentially, really, because of
Now,
his.
how did that kind of happen? I mean, did you have a mass of German immigrants, or was it sort of, hey, the word's out, German folks in America, and was it a slower over the course of years migration?
It was over the course of years, but it was I don't have the numbers down, but exactly how fast it grew, but it grew pretty fast. It was just him. He was sending out that newspaper, and he sent it back to Germany, but he also had people coming down from Cincinnati, where and Chicago. That's where
Oh,
my great grandparents came down from Chicago. They
uh-huh.
had come from Germany into New York, and then they settled in Chicago. My great grandmother was too cold and up there in Chicago. She didn't like that. So when they found out about Coleman, they came down in 1883 is when they originally came down. So they came. This was 1873 when he founded Coleman, the city of Coleman. And
Okay.
then then the county came along. It was taking parts of it were mostly Blount County and some out of Winston County, and then a little bit out of some of the other surrounding counties, but mostly Blount and Winston County
Mhm.
were larger at the time.
And you say that in the 1880s was your great grandparents?
Yeah, a lot of people say that. Yeah, because they my note that my great grandfather was born in 111 years before I was. So they had large families. My grandfather was like the next to youngest son,
Uh,
and then my father was the second to youngest child of his father. So you had people that they were like in their mid 30s before they were being born, and then my dad was 34 before I was born.
okay.
So
So
so you didn't have
y'all kind of stretch it out a little bit.
stretched it out. So yeah, I have a lot of people say, "Well, I knew my great grandfather," and it's like they're looking at a picture of my great grandparents hanging on our living room wall, and they're like, "That's your great grandfather? That guy's like from the 1800s." Like, yeah.
Yeah, my mom was one of the youngest in her family, and her dad was already an older guy when I was around. And my daughters think it's so cool that they met him and that he met people who fought in the Civil War. That's
Yeah.
like crazy now, but
Yeah.
it's you start doing the math, it works
Yeah.
out. One of the most of all the things that prohibition brought us. I'm really switching gears on you now.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
stop me and go back if you want to. It's just it was a question I had. One of the most German slash Southern things that I've ever heard of. Maybe the only German slash Southern thing, I don't know, but it's really German slash Southern, is a beer free Oktoberfest, which Cullman was dry until recently. To talk
Yeah.
about Oktoberfest and its history.
Yeah, well, I was also on the. I got on a friend of mine on the when I was on the in the historical society before I was president of the historical society. A friend of mine was also on the Oktoberfest board. He got me on the Oktoberfest board, got me appointed to that, and so it just so happened the first year, 2011, that I was on the board, we went wet, but it had Oktoberfest started in Cullman. Well, first let me know that a lot of the German influence. It was very German. Cullman stayed very German. Uh, the churches, the Protestant church I mentioned, kept German services. Now they downplayed during World War I and World War II. They had to downplay their German heritage, and because we were fighting Germany in both those wars. Well, uh, but they never in World War One they never stopped having German services at St. John's. And in the 1930s, a lot of the people were second or even third generation at the church, so they wanted English services. So
Mm,
the older people didn't want that. They wanted to keep the German services. So there was a church split, and a new church was formed right like one block down the street, and it was called Christ English Lutheran Church because they had services in English. That was the only. There was no kind of doctrinal split or anything. It was just simply they wanted services in English. They've dropped the word English from their title now because now everybody speaks English. Because what happened with St. John's was World War II came along, and then Hitler was even worse than the Germans we fought in World War One,
right.
the Germany we fought in World War One. So they wanted no association with Hitler. So finally, that's what caused them to go to the English services. But meanwhile, at the same time, there was a lot of, you had prohibition in America. I don't know what year Cullman went dry. No, I have searched and searched, and no one knows the year that this happened. But some of the older people, when I was younger, would remembered still the instances of people just falling out drunk in the streets. What happened was Cullman was a destination place
Mm,
where people would come and spend the weekend. They would get on the train and they would come. There would be different hotels for people from Decatur or Birmingham or wherever. And for some reason, everybody just came, and it was a party place. And so that got to be so bad that they just basically outlawed alcohol.
huh.
So then your German heritage was basically that was you toned down the German heritage because of the world wars. Then you outlawed alcohol, so there was nothing really German about it until I was a kid in 1973. We had the centennial celebration, and we marked that, but that still didn't turn us German really until about 10 years later. Sacred Heart Catholic School started having an Oktoberfest event, and that became, it was just a thing with the school and the church that they had for like a couple of nights. It kind of got picked up by the museum. Coleman County Museum picked up and kind of started doing some events, and they had a week long events, and they were family events. They had a drink that was muscadine juice that was called October Zest that was made just for Coleman Oktoberfest, and because there was no beer. And
Oh, I should probably say at some point because there are people who may not know the history of beer. Germany is a big beer country, so when the part of the culture was this, and I remember hearing from kids of GIs that families had beer for supper, with their kids and everything. It was just culturally that's that's a thing. So that's why it going dry was like you lose part of your heritage there.
Exactly. They started the Oktoberfest grew and grew and grew, and with a lot of they had a lot of events. They had German bands and just stuff for senior adults and for school children, all kind of stuff. Just for a week, they would have a week of this stuff. Even it was so funny. It got mentioned on the Daily Show. There was a segment on the Daily Show in the late aughts, in 2006 or seven or something. They came out and kind of did a segment on it. It was a part of a larger. I think they were. I think it was when Alabama was like debating upping, allowing beer with a larger alcohol content was part of that
Right.
segment. But still, it kind of got mentioned. And but 2011 came along, and alcohol finally there were votes. My entire life there were wet dry votes. That was never done in the county. Then they made it where cities of a certain size could do it, and Cullman finally met the eligibility. But I think it took two or three efforts even then to pass. It finally passed, and for the city, and then that was allowed an Oktoberfest, and it was a little. There was some controversy there. Some people wanted to keep it the way it had been.
Right.
And so you felt it was more family friendly without beer. That beer was gonna like not make it as family friendly. Others felt differently, and then there's the first year I'm on the Oktoberfest board. Is we're going to decide, are we going to have a wet Oktoberfest? So the compromise that year was that there was a small section roped off where you could have. I think you actually had to be in the beer garden. The first year
Okay.
you could have
Yeah.
the beer in the beer. You couldn't walk around the entire festivities with beer. So that was kind of
No
mm,
drinking and walking.
that was kind of yeah, that was kind of worse for probably a lot of people who than just not having beer at all. But slowly the next year there was a more roped off, larger roped off area, and then the next year it was just there. It was. It was just
Right.
went out there and it's all there, and it's been ever since. And
I got to tell you, I want my stein filled with some of that muscadine zest. That's
well,
really got.
and as a board member, I wanted, and as I'm a non-drinker, so I wanted to keep the zest, and then even the people who were anti-alcohol were like, no, we're going to get rid. It's going to be beer. We're not going to still have the zest. And it's like, well, that's part of the heritage of Cullman Oktoberfest, but I was voted down. So
There's a black market for zest out there. We
yeah,
could be zest runners.
yeah,
So,
and you mentioned my wife. She was not a Southerner. She came from Connecticut. She was born in Connecticut, lived her adult life mostly in New York City and San Francisco, and then we met uh, through blogging. We had and we ended up. She ended up moving to Cullman, and we went to Oktoberfest, and that's how the idea. She saw this guy walking around as Colonel Cullman. He's a brilliant guy, master of ceremonies for all the events. What's the deal? She's like, what's the deal with that guy? Well, both of it, we wanted. She's like a playwright, an artist, writer, and stuff. And I was involved in journalism and writing. We wanted to, and I always wanted to be a filmmaker. We
uh,
wanted to do something to get into the Sidewalk Film Festival. And she said, I want to find out about this guy because he's just like everywhere, and he is Colonel Coleman. He is just like the whole shebang.
mhm.
So we approached him about doing a short documentary on him, and so we did. And so she was the writer and director. Her name is Laura J. Axelrod. Axelrod. I'm sorry, I'm not speaking well. Let me say that again. Laura J. Axelrod.
Make sure you get it
And
right.
yeah, got to get that right. And so I did the photography and the editing, and she did the rest of it. She directed it, wrote it. but it's from her told from her perspective about how she came to this place that she noticed there were reenactments all the time because like even she and I did a as part of the we did historical we did characters we did my great grandparents and then some other people different years for the historical society's cemetery tour during Oktoberfest. So she noticed a lot of this stuff going on, and then there are Pine Heart farm days. There's an old farm that a family no longer farms as much as they did, but the house is like our house. The house is still there, and they have people come out for educational stuff, and then they have a festival every October. And so she noticed, and so people are dressed up like old farm days for that. So she noticed that kind of going on and put it all together. She wanted to find out why this guy, how they got this guy. So basically, his name is Larry Rowletti, and he is an electrical engineer working in Huntsville, and he lives in Decatur. He does not even live in Cullman. So what's the deal with that? So we interviewed him. He basically was born in Nashville and came down here for a job. Basically, they were in Cullman. You can watch our film. You want a little? I'll give the quick and dirty, but you can
I'll
watch
link
our
to it in
film.
show notes.
Yeah, it's becoming Colonel Cullman, and Cullman is with two N's because Colonel Cullman was German. His name had two N's, but he said Americans didn't do that. So now Cullman County and Cullman City ends with one N, not two. So if you that's not a misspelling if you see two N, or if you Google it, if you look it up on YouTube, it's two N's. But he happened to be eating and there, and they talking about the place, and a real estate agent heard him, sold him a place there, so they ended up moving there because he had a job in Huntsville. But they liked Coleman, and so they ended up moving there. Went to church there, and the pastor of St. John's Church, where he so happened to start going to St. John's Church. The pastor of the church at the time, Bob Kurtz, and the head of the Oktoberfest board, Elaine Fuller, were, for some reason, they were in Decatur watching a presentation by a guy who used to do Commodore Stephen. He did a reenactor. He was a reenactor as Commodore Stephen Decatur,
Oh,
who
okay.
did not found Decatur, but it's named after him.
Uh-huh.
So they said when they got there, they said after they saw that presentation, they said we need a Colonel Coleman,
Oh, yeah.
and so they found Larry, and he decided to, and he did it for years. And this was sometime in the '90s, I'm imagining, and he did it for years and years. And he was the master of ceremonies, and he had the long beard, so all he had to do was get the costume. He's in costume. He's Colonel Coleman. You can't address him. If you call him Larry, he won't answer you. So
He did have a European look. He does have a European
yeah,
look about him. Although he opens his mouth, he sounds like we do.
yeah, exactly. That's the funny part is he he says hogs.
That's right. Yeah,
To hear
we'll
the
link to
story
that.
about the hogs, you'll have to watch the movie. That's a
Yeah,
teaser.
we'll link to that. We'll link to that in show notes. Um, yeah, well, and that which kind of brings us to Oktoberfest, second
Yeah.
through the fourth. You can have actual beer in your stein if that's your thing. Um, Greg, are we leaving anything on the table? I know there's plenty to talk about.
Well, there's well, the only thing is I said earlier that it was a week long case, and now it's only like Thursday through Saturday. But really, that's the official events at the. If you go to their schedule, you'll see that there are still events. Sacred Heart still has its own event on Wednesday,
Okay.
and St. John's has Bach and Brats, and I think that's on Sunday. So this is all stuff ahead of the actual. So there are all kind of school events and things that happen, in community events that happen. So it is still a week long. It's just not officially downtown at the center of area. And those of you who aren't familiar with Coleman, it's right next. There's a replica of Colonel Coleman's home. They have a picture. They have pictures of his house, which burned down after he passed away. And but it's not in the same place, but it's the museum. The Cullman County Museum is now a replica of Colonel Cullman's home, and it's open. I think it used to be when I was on the board, it was open free for tours during Oktoberfest.
Okay.
But it doesn't cost a lot.
Okay.
It doesn't cost you $50. You know, it's affordable.
Hey, one more question about Coleman, and this is just an inside one for some of my people out there.
Yeah.
If they get it, they get it. Folks who don't worry about it. Is the Mary Carter Paint Store still in business?
The Mary Carter Paint Store is still in business. I know that's an interest of yours, and you can actually, as a plug, you can buy our DVD with all the extras. I know you can watch the movie on and the making of the Hay People, who were a central part of. You can watch those on YouTube, but you can get all kind of cool extras on our DVD. I think it's $5 for
At the
those
Mary
cheap.
Carter Paint Store. Very,
You
very
can buy it
good
at
for
the Mary
those.
Carter Paint Store, or you can buy it at. We've got a booth at Finders Keepers in downtown Cullman,
Okay.
239. You can buy it there. I didn't pay
Folks.
for this ad, so I hope that's okay.
But no, everybody gets a plug. The folks are maybe coming in for Oktoberfest. They can check it out.
Yeah, exactly.
Greg Richter, I really appreciate it. Love catching up with you, man.
Yeah, same here.
Hey, thanks everybody out there for listening to us. We're going to be back here bright and early Monday morning. Until then, y'all come by and see what we're doing anytime you want to on the internet at al.com.